My name is Derek Langston. I'm 33 years old, and for the past 8 years I've been teaching 3rd grade at Westfield Elementary in Kansas City, Missouri. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. I've spent most of my adult life helping kids who can't yet tell the difference between multiplication and long division, who still lose their jackets in the cafeteria, who sometimes need their teacher more than they need the lesson plan. For years, I thought that kind of steady devotion was my identity, my whole life. But 5 weeks and 2 days into my marriage, that identity shifted with one sentence. It's my body. You don't get to demand anything from me. Those words came out of Madison's mouth while she sat slouched on our brown leather couch, the one I bought 3 years ago when I thought I'd be alone forever. Her tone wasn't angry, it was dismissive, cold. Like she was swatting away a fly. We had been married for just over a month, and in that entire time she hadn't once let me kiss her longer than a second. Not once had she curled her fingers through mine while we watched TV, or leaned her head on my shoulder when I came home from a long day with my students. Every attempt at closeness, whether reaching for her hand at dinner with my parents or suggesting a weekend getaway, was met with the same phrase, my body, my choice. At first, I told myself it was nerves, or maybe post-wedding exhaustion. Some couples stumble in those first weeks, I thought. But that night, sitting across from her while she scrolled on her phone like I wasn't even in the room, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Madison, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice even. I'm not demanding anything. I'm asking why you won't even kiss me goodnight. She didn't look up. I told you. My body, my choice. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I respected it. How could I not? But this wasn't about pressure. This was about marriage. About the promise we had made to each other at St. Catherine's Chapel in front of God, our families, and the friends who cheered as we exchanged rings. About the vows I had taken seriously, perhaps too seriously. But the Madison I was speaking to that night didn't resemble the woman I had dated for 14 months. That Madison used to laugh at my corny math jokes. She used to curl against me during movie nights, whispering commentary under her breath until we both dissolved into giggles. She would wake up early on Saturdays just to brew coffee and sit with me while I graded a mountain of spelling tests. This Madison acted like I was a stranger who had overstayed his welcome. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and made myself a turkey and Swiss sandwich on wheat bread, the same thing I'd eaten every school lunch since September. I stood at the counter chewing slowly, staring at the empty mayonnaise jar I had forgotten to replace, and thought about something she had said months earlier during premarital counseling. Marriage is about security and partnership, not just physical stuff. At the time, I'd taken it as a compliment. I thought she was telling Pastor Williams that we had a bond deeper than attraction. But chewing that bland sandwich in the half-lit kitchen, it struck me differently. It struck me as a warning I hadn't heard. The woman I'd married wasn't withholding affection because she was adjusting to new routines. She was withholding it because she had planned to. And the way she had said it that night, you thought wrong, with no flicker of regret, no apology, no hesitation, carved the truth into my bones. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't an accident. This was the plan all along. I walked back to the living room, but she hadn't moved. Still scrolling, eyes glazed, as though the collapse of our marriage wasn't unfolding right there on the couch. For the first time, I realized I was looking at a stranger, someone who wore my wife's face but didn't want to be my wife. I sat in silence, the TV buzzing softly in the background, and felt the weight of betrayal settle in my chest. Not loud, not dramatic. Just heavy. Cold. Final. It was the first fracture. But it would not be the last. The days that followed blurred into a routine that didn't feel like mine. I woke at 6:15, ironed a shirt, tied the same navy tie, and drove 20 minutes to Westfield Elementary. For 7 hours, I was Mr. Langston again, the patient teacher, the steady hand guiding 30 restless kids through long division and cursive handwriting. And in that classroom, I almost forgot. Almost. Because even as I taught, the silence at home echoed in the back of my mind. Silence where there should have been laughter, warmth, arguments even, something. Instead, our apartment felt like two strangers renting the same square footage. Every evening, I would come home, set down my briefcase, and glance toward the couch. Madison was always there. Phone in hand. Screen glow reflecting in her eyes. She didn't look up when I walked in. Didn't ask about my day. Didn't even pause whatever scroll hole she'd fallen into. And every night, I tried again. How was work? I'd ask. Fine. Want to order dinner in? Not hungry. Do you want to watch something together? You can if you want. 3-word answers. Monosyllables. Nothing. I stopped pressing. But the silence pressed back. One night, about 2 weeks after that first fight, I tried to bridge the gap again. I sat on the far end of the couch and said softly, "Madison, can you just tell me what's happening? Did I do something wrong?" Her eyes flicked to me for less than a second before landing back on the phone. "Not everything's about you, Derek." The words cut deeper than I let her see. Because marriage, our marriage, was supposed to be about us. And yet, she was living like it was only about her. That night, lying awake in the dark, I replayed everything in my head. The engagement party where she had glowed in that pale blue dress. The honeymoon where she smiled for photos but never once reached for my hand when the camera wasn't pointed our way. The counseling sessions where she had said all the right things to the pastor but left me wondering afterward if she meant any of it. And then a thought I didn't want to think crept in. What if she married me not for love, but for something else? The idea festered over the next few days. Her refusal of intimacy. Her distance. Her detachment. It didn't feel like resentment. It felt calculated. One Friday evening, after the kids had gone home and I was stacking math workbooks on my desk, I found myself staring at the classroom wall clock, realizing I didn't want to go home. For the first time in my life, I'd rather stay in a room full of empty desks than drive back to the apartment where my wife sat like a stranger. I stayed until the janitor flicked the lights off. When I finally did walk through the apartment door, she didn't look up. She never did. And I realized then, it wasn't just that she wasn't loving me. It was that she didn't care if I noticed. And that silence, that absence of even the smallest attempt at connection, was louder than any argument could have been. It was the echo of silence. And it was breaking me. The 3rd week of our marriage ended on a Sunday evening, and by then I had memorized the rhythm of her indifference. The glow of her phone. The flat replies. The way she angled her body ever so slightly away from me on the couch, as if physical distance could disguise emotional absence. But that night, something shifted. We were eating takeout. Well, I was eating takeout. Madison had picked at the lo mein with her chopsticks, more interested in her screen than the food in front of her. I tried to make small talk, the way I always did. Weather. My students. An anecdote about one boy who insisted giraffe was spelled with a J. She didn't even smile. Halfway through my story, her phone buzzed. A different kind of buzz. Shorter, sharper. I'd never noticed that sound before. She picked it up instantly, her expression flickering for a fraction of a second. It was gone so fast, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But I didn't imagine the way she rose from the table, phone in hand, and walked straight into the bedroom. She closed the door behind her. For 20 minutes, I sat alone, staring at the untouched carton of lo mein across from me. My fork hung limp in my hand, the TV droning faintly in the background. When she finally emerged, she didn't offer an explanation. She didn't even meet my eyes. She just sat back down, screen in hand, like nothing had happened. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. She had friends. She had co-workers. Maybe it was one of them. Maybe it was her mother. Maybe. But that flicker, that brief, unguarded flicker of her face before she shut the bedroom door, wasn't the face of a woman texting her mother. It was the face of someone who had something to hide. That night, as she lay turned away from me in bed, scrolling her phone with the brightness dimmed low, I stared at the ceiling and felt my stomach knot. The pattern was becoming clear. The marriage I thought I had wasn't real. The laughter we used to share? Gone. The affection? Never there to begin with. And now, secrets. Secrets slipping through the cracks, revealing a Madison I didn't know. I had walked into marriage believing I was gaining a partner for life. Instead, I had walked into a performance, a mask she wore well enough to get to the altar, but one she had no intention of keeping on afterward. And for the first time, lying in that dark room with her silent beside me, I realized the mask wasn't slipping. It had already fallen. The next week, I started watching more carefully. Not because I wanted to catch her doing something wrong, but because I needed answers. My life, our marriage, had turned into a riddle, and every day I walked in from work, I prayed I'd find a clue. And I did. Monday night, she came home late. I asked where she'd been. Target, she said flatly, dropping a plastic bag on the counter. Inside was a single bottle of body wash. That was it. No receipt. No red shopping bag. Just a drugstore brand tossed into a bag she could have grabbed from anywhere. Tuesday, she wore makeup to the office. Madison never wore makeup to work. She always said it was too much effort for a desk job. But that morning, her eyeliner was sharp, her lipstick fresh. She brushed off my compliment with a shrug, muttering, "It's nothing." Wednesday, she got another one of those texts. Same short buzz. Same instant reaction, phone grabbed, face shifting, retreat into the bedroom. I listened through the door, straining to hear her voice. But the only sound was the muffled cadence of someone speaking too low, too careful. And Thursday. Thursday was the worst. I came home early. Parent-teacher conferences had wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we could have dinner together like a real couple. I even stopped at a small bakery on the way and picked up a box of her favorite pastries. But when I opened the apartment door, I froze. She was sitting on the couch, phone angled toward her face, lips pursed in that half-smile she hadn't shown me in months. The screen caught her at just the right angle, and I realized with a sick drop in my stomach, she was on a video call. With who? I didn't know. But the warmth in her eyes told me enough. It wasn't me. The moment she noticed me, the smile vanished. She ended the call with a quick, clipped, "I'll text you later," and set the phone down like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Who was that? I asked quietly, pastry box still in my hands. "Nobody," she said, standing too quickly. "A friend from work." Her voice was too calm, too rehearsed. And standing there in the doorway, holding pastries that suddenly felt heavy, I realized the truth. These weren't random behaviors. They weren't coincidences. They were warning signs. And I had ignored them for too long. That weekend, I tested her. Not in a cruel way, just enough to see if my gut was right. Saturday morning, I pretended to leave for work. I slipped on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and said, "I've got some grading to catch up on at school." She barely nodded, eyes locked on her phone. But instead of driving to Westfield Elementary, I circled the block and parked down the street. I sat there, engine off, heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. 20 minutes passed. Then the curtains shifted. Madison peeked outside, checked the street like a thief casing a house, then disappeared. Minutes later, a man walked up the sidewalk. Tall, broad-shouldered, confident stride. He didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. He opened the door with a key. My stomach turned to ice. I couldn't see much from where I sat, but I didn't need to. That was all the proof I required. A man with a key to our apartment. A man who walked in like he belonged there. I clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Every rational part of me screamed to storm inside, to demand answers, to throw him out with my bare hands if I had to. But another part of me, the colder, steadier part, told me to wait, to watch, to learn. After an hour, he left. Casual. Relaxed. He didn't glance over his shoulder once. When I finally walked back into the apartment, Madison was curled up on the couch, phone in hand, like nothing had happened. No trace of him. No evidence. Just the same wall of indifference she always gave me. "Back so soon?" she asked, eyes flicking up. I forced a smile. "Yeah. Got done quicker than I thought." She nodded, already turning back to her screen. And that's when it hit me, she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Not really. She had stopped caring whether I noticed. The stranger in my home wasn't just the man with the key. It was the woman sitting on my couch, scrolling her phone, pretending to be my wife. The following week, I stopped pretending. Every day I came home, I looked for signs. A shirt that wasn't mine folded in the laundry basket. A faint smell of cologne lingering in the hallway. 2 wine glasses in the sink when I knew I'd only used one. And they were all there. Every sign. Each one screaming the same truth I didn't want to face. One night, I stayed late at school under the pretense of lesson planning. In reality, I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at my phone, trying to summon the courage to call her out. But when I finally drove home, my resolve melted the second I opened the door. She was on the couch again. Same posture. Same glow from her screen. Same indifference. But the difference wasn't her, it was me. I knew. And once you know, you can't unknow. I sat down across from her, watching her face illuminated by the cold light of her phone. "Madison," I said softly, "is there someone else?" Her eyes didn't even flicker. She scrolled once, twice, then set the phone on the armrest and looked at me with the calm detachment of someone discussing the weather. "What if there is?" The world tilted. I stared at her, waiting for some sign of regret, of hesitation, of shame. But there was nothing. No apology. No denial. No effort to fight for us. Just a casual confirmation that everything I'd suspected was true. I swallowed hard. "So, this whole time," she shrugged. "Marriage means different things to different people, Derek. You wanted one version. I wanted another." Her words cut deeper than any confession could. It wasn't just that she had betrayed me. It was that she had never seen us the same way I did. All those nights of silence. All those excuses. All those warning signs. They hadn't been mistakes. They'd been choices. And I had been blind enough to ignore them. That night, lying awake while she slept soundly beside me, I made myself a promise. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of hers unraveling. The next morning, I didn't get up at 6:15. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her hum softly in the bathroom while she got ready for work. The sound used to comfort me. Now it felt like mockery, like the soundtrack to my humiliation. She left without a word, perfume trailing faintly in the air. A scent I hadn't smelled in months, but I knew instantly she hadn't worn it for me. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands and realized I had two choices. Option 1, stay. Pretend. Keep playing the role of dutiful husband while she lived a double life right under my nose. That path meant silence. Emptiness. Watching myself dissolve a little more every day. Option 2, act. Not out of rage. Not recklessly. But deliberately. With clarity. For years, I had taught my students about cause and effect, choices and consequences. I had told them that every action, no matter how small, shapes what comes next. Now, sitting alone in that apartment, I realized it was time to follow my own lesson. I pulled out a notebook, the same kind I used for grading, and started writing. Not lesson plans. Not spelling tests. A record. Dates. Times. Patterns. Her late nights. Her sudden bursts of secrecy. The man with the key. Her own words. What if there is? Every detail went down on paper. Because if she thought she could rewrite the story of our marriage, she was wrong. I was going to document the truth. And when the time came, I would use it. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about taking back control. I closed the notebook, slid it into my desk drawer, and looked around the apartment that had once felt like home. It didn't feel like mine anymore. But soon, it wouldn't feel like hers either. The decision was made. And once I make a decision, I don't turn back. Once I made the decision, something in me shifted. I stopped begging. I stopped questioning. I stopped trying to win back what had never truly been mine. Instead, I watched. And watching, gave me power. The more I pulled back, the bolder she became. Late nights grew later. Excuses thinner. She didn't even bother to hide the second wineglass anymore. Once, I caught a faint outline of a man's shoes by the door. When she noticed my eyes flicker toward them, she smirked, and kicked them further into the shadows. That smirk told me everything. She thought I was weak. A harmless schoolteacher too meek to confront her. Too spineless to fight back. She didn't know who she'd married. Teaching third grade didn't erase my past. 14 years ago, I'd worn a different uniform. One that taught me patience, precision, discipline. Skills that never leave you, no matter how many classrooms you hide them in. So I prepared. I copied every receipt she left crumpled in her purse. I photographed the empty wine bottles I hadn't opened. I tracked her absences with the same meticulous care I used to grade long division worksheets. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed. And behind it all, a storm gathered inside me. Not the storm of blind rage. I'd seen too many men destroy themselves with that. No, this was colder, quieter. The kind of storm that waits for the perfect moment to break. Every time she brushed past me without a glance, every time her phone buzzed with that sharp little chime, every time she vanished into the bedroom to whisper words meant for someone else. The storm grew darker. She thought she was playing a game. But what she didn't understand was simple. I never play games I don't plan to win. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. I'd stayed late at school again, grading spelling tests under the hum of fluorescent lights. Not because I had to, because I couldn't stand the thought of going home. When I finally walked through the door at 9:30, I heard laughter. Not hers, his. A deep, careless laugh that didn't belong in my apartment. My pulse slowed. Not quickened, slowed. The way it used to when I stepped into a room overseas and knew, without a doubt, that something was about to happen. I dropped my briefcase quietly by the door. The laughter came again, followed by her voice, playful, alive in a way I hadn't heard in months. She hadn't spoken to me like that since before the wedding. I stepped closer. The voices were coming from the kitchen. There he was. The man with the key. Tall, broad-shouldered, leaning casually against my counter like it belonged to him. A half-empty bottle of wine sat open between them. 2 glasses. Hers nearly drained. His halfway there. And Madison, my wife, perched on the counter, smiling at him like he was the only man in the world. She saw me first. Her smile froze, then faded, replaced by something worse than guilt. Indifference. "Oh," she said flatly, as if I'd just come home 10 minutes early. "You're back." The man turned, eyes narrowing, but he didn't move. Didn't flinch. He looked me up and down, measuring me. I met his stare, calm. Steady. Madison slid off the counter, brushing imaginary dust from her skirt. "Derek, this is..." I held up a hand. "Don't." Silence settled over the kitchen. For a moment, none of us moved. 3 people standing in a triangle of betrayal, wine, and unspoken truths. Then, slowly, I picked up one of the glasses. I studied the half-drunk wine, the lipstick smudge on the rim, the evidence of everything I'd suspected. And I set it back down. Carefully. Deliberately. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't break. Because breaking would have meant she'd won. No, the storm wasn't over. It was just reaching its peak. I didn't go back that night. I drove. No destination, no plan, just mile after mile under the glow of street lamps until the city gave way to open roads. Her laughter echoed in my head. His voice. The casual way she said, "Oh, you're back." Like I was the intruder. By sunrise, I was parked outside a 24-hour diner, hands wrapped around a coffee I didn't taste. My notebook sat open on the counter beside me, pages filled with dates, times, receipts, photographs, evidence, proof. I flipped through it slowly, methodically, the way I used to check gear before a mission. Every detail was in place. Every inconsistency noted. Every lie preserved in ink. I realized then this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about theft. She had stolen my trust, my home, my peace of mind. And thieves don't get to walk away clean. The next few days, I played my part. I went to work. I graded papers. I smiled at colleagues. At night, I returned to the apartment as if nothing had happened. Madison didn't mention him. Didn't apologize. She acted as though that Thursday never existed. That told me everything. She thought I was broken. But I wasn't broken. I was patient. I began moving things quietly. Important documents. Family heirlooms. A few framed photos that actually mattered to me. All slipped into boxes and stored in the trunk of my car. She didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care. Then I reached out to an old friend. Not from teaching. From before. Someone who still owed me a favor. Someone who knew how to dig. In less than a week, I had a name for the man with the key. A background. A history. And it was worse than I imagined. Because this wasn't just a fling. It was a setup. A setup that went deeper than betrayal. A setup that was about to collapse, because she had underestimated the one man who doesn't lose when the reckoning begins. His name was Ryan Mercer. 37. Construction foreman. Divorced. 2 kids he barely saw because of what the custody documents called behavioral instability. The file my contact sent me was thick with restraining orders, bar fights, unpaid debts. And tucked between the lines of police reports and court documents, one detail stopped me cold. Ryan and Madison had been linked before. Not recently. Years ago. Before I ever met her. She hadn't just fallen into his arms during some marital rough patch. She had gone back to him. Back to someone she'd known, someone she'd hidden. I read the emails next. Dozens of them, stretching back months. Madison had been careful. No texting, no calls I could track. But she couldn't hide the digital trail of her work laptop. Dates matched up with the nights she claimed to be working late. Excuses I'd swallowed whole. They'd been planning this for a while. In one message, Ryan wrote, "He'll take care of the bills, the insurance, the house. You'll be free to do your own thing. Don't worry, he's too soft to fight back." My jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. Another email, "Once the annulment mess is over, you'll be secure, and he'll just fade out. Guys like him always do. Fade out." That was the word. The verdict they'd passed on me, together, laughing in the dark. I sat at my desk in the empty classroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and read those emails over and over. Each word sharpened my anger into something precise, controlled. This wasn't an affair. It was a con. A business arrangement, just like her marriage vows had been. Ryan was the partner on the side, the emotional outlet. I was the stable paycheck, the insurance policy, the fool in the wings. But I wasn't fading out. I was documenting. Every email, every timestamp, every careless word, they became exhibits in my growing case file. My evidence wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about intent, about premeditation. At night, I'd sit in the dark apartment and listen to the silence from the guest room. Madison thought her secret was safe. She thought she'd broken me into silence. But she didn't see what I saw, the trap tightening, the mask slipping, the moment coming when both she and Ryan would realize that the man they thought was soft had been sharpening the knife of truth all along. I started with silence. Silence unnerves people more than shouting ever could. Madison expected confrontation, expected me to break. Instead, I played my part. Husband on autopilot. Smiles at dinner. Quick nods before bed. Casual talk about school, groceries, gas prices. Meanwhile, my file grew heavier. Copies of emails. Screenshots. Bank records showing mysterious withdrawals that matched nights she claimed to be out with co-workers. Ryan's name slipped quietly into the margins, tying him to her with a thread that would soon become a noose. But evidence alone wasn't enough. Betrayers don't just collapse under facts. They double down, twist the truth, cry victim. No, I needed something more. Something undeniable. So I staged patience. I set small traps. I suggested we plan a spring trip, something romantic, a reset. She hesitated, eyes darting. Maybe, she said, if work slows down. I noted the date. That was the same week she and Ryan had emailed about finally being free. I left a spare phone charger in the guest room. Days later, it was gone. Checked the call log on the house phone. Blocked numbers. Cross-referenced the times. They matched the empty windows on her calendar app. Piece by piece, she was building her own gallows. The final confirmation came on a Wednesday. Parent-teacher conferences had run late, and I returned home earlier than expected. Her car was in the lot. Lights off. Curtains drawn. But through the thin walls, I heard it. A laugh. Not Madison's. A man's voice, low, too comfortable, too familiar. I didn't open the door. Didn't storm in. Instead, I turned on my heel, walked back down the steps, and slid into my car. Engine silent. Windows cracked. I waited. An hour later, Ryan slipped out the side door. No kiss goodbye. No rushed panic. Just a man leaving a place he thought was his. That was my breaking point, but not my explosion. Because explosions are loud, messy, and over too quick. What I wanted was slow. Surgical. Devastating. The kind of revenge that doesn't just punish. It unmasks. And Madison was about to learn what it felt like when the trap you've built for someone else snaps shut on you instead. The next morning, I brewed coffee like always. Madison shuffled in, robe loosely tied, scrolling her phone like she had nothing to hide. I slid her mug across the counter, steady hands, calm eyes. "You've been busy," I said casually. Her head lifted. What do you mean? I let the silence hang. 1 beat. 2. Then I smiled. Work. Late nights. Calls. Conferences. You've been dedicated. She relaxed, relieved, thinking I was blind. That was the beauty of masks. People get so comfortable wearing them, they forget how fragile they are. I went to work. Came home. Played the role. Meanwhile, my friend kept feeding me details. Ryan's arrest record. His gambling debts. His history with women. Always the same pattern, always the same outcome. Madison thought she'd traded stability for excitement. In reality, she'd shackled herself to a sinking weight. I began planting seeds. Small comments during dinner, subtle enough to slip past her guard, but sharp enough to dig later. Strange how quick money disappears when you're not watching. Ever notice how people repeat the same mistakes with different faces? Trust, it's a dangerous thing to gamble with. Her eyes would flicker, searching my tone, but I always smiled, always softened the words with a laugh. She never pressed. Then came Friday. I forgot my laptop at home and returned midday. The apartment was empty. No car in the lot. No shoes by the door. On the kitchen counter, though, was her phone, unlocked, buzzing with a new message. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to. The preview was enough. Ryan, tonight's the night. He'll never see it coming. That was the confirmation. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a setup. They weren't just betraying me. They were planning something bigger. And if Ryan thought I'd never see it coming, he was about to learn that I'd been watching the whole time. I didn't confront her that night. No shouting match. No scene. Instead, I leaned into the performance. I kissed her cheek when she walked through the door, asked about her meeting, and sat across from her at dinner, every move measured. She talked too much. Nervous chatter. Work drama. Her sister's birthday. A recipe she wanted to try. All noise meant to fill the silence. She didn't notice how I listened differently now, filing away every syllable. Later, when she slipped into the shower, I checked her purse. A second phone. Burner. Cheap. Prepaid. Confirmed what I already knew. Ryan wasn't just a fling. He was part of a plan. But here's the thing about plans. The moment you think yours is airtight, that's when it's weakest. I started my own double game. I called my old friend again. The one who dug up Ryan's past. Gave him new instructions. Follow the money. Within 48 hours, he had it. Transfers. Cash withdrawals. A shared account. Madison's signature right there beside Ryan's. They weren't just sleeping together. They were building a life on my dime. That night, lying in bed, I traced patterns on the ceiling, my mind cold and steady. If they wanted a game, I'd play it, but with rules they couldn't even see. Rule 1. Never tip your hand. Rule 2. Let them believe they're winning. Rule 3. Strike only when the trap is sealed shut. Madison stirred beside me, half asleep, whispering his name. Not mine. His. I smiled into the darkness. Because she thought she was dreaming of a future. What she didn't know was that she was already living in the nightmare I was writing for her. And the last chapter. That would be mine. By Monday, the outlines of their plan were clear. Madison thought she was careful, deleting messages, hiding phones, moving money in small amounts. But she underestimated the one thing I had mastered long before I ever became a teacher. Patterns. Patterns don't lie. Every Thursday, she left an hour earlier than usual. Every Saturday morning, the yoga class ran just long enough for Ryan's car to pull into the complex and disappear again. And every month on the 15th, a withdrawal posted that didn't match our bills. But the message on her phone, that was the tell. Tonight's the night. He'll never see it coming. What did they mean? Robbery? A staged exit? Something darker? Whatever it was, they wanted me blind. Which made it easier to let them think I was. I leaned harder into the role of the oblivious husband. I joked at dinner. I complimented her dress. I even suggested we invite some friends over for a game night. Madison smiled, too wide, too relieved, mistaking my kindness for weakness. Meanwhile, I began building the counterplay. I moved the last of my valuables, documents, cash, even a pistol locked in the safe, into storage. Changed the locks on my office at school. quietly redirected my paycheck into a private account. And then I staged the first test. I told her I had a late staff meeting. Instead, I parked across the street from our apartment. At 7:13 p.m., right on cue, Ryan's car pulled in. He didn't even check the lot. He strolled in like he owned the place. An hour later, he left. Madison didn't text, didn't call. She simply reheated leftovers and asked, "How was your meeting?" when I walked in. I smiled. Productive. Inside, I knew the truth. They weren't preparing to leave me. They were preparing to take something from me. But the beautiful irony? By the time they made their move, everything they thought they were stealing would already be gone. And when they finally realized it, when the setup for their setup collapsed, I'd be standing right there, holding the last piece of the puzzle. Thursday arrived like clockwork. She kissed my cheek in the doorway, perfume sharp, eyes glittering with a secret she thought she carried well. "I'll be late tonight," she murmured. "Don't wait up." I nodded. Of course. She left. Ryan would come later. I knew their rhythm by heart now. But this night wasn't just another rehearsal. It was the night they promised each other I'd never see coming. So I prepared. The apartment looked untouched. Bills stacked neatly. Wallet left on the counter. Bedroom door ajar, as if I'd already gone to sleep. Everything staged to say, unaware, vulnerable, unprotected. But the truth was different. Every light bulb in the living room was fitted with a micro camera, motion activated, feeding to a drive tucked beneath the floorboards. The neighbors I'd barely spoken to in 2 years? One of them owed me a favor, too. Tonight, he'd be walking his dog at just the right time. By 9:42 p.m., I heard the lock turn. Soft footsteps. Whispered laughter. Madison's voice, hushed but excited. Ryan's reply, low and confident. They thought they were alone. I stayed still in the dark of my office, breath steady, eyes on the monitor showing them in grainy black and white. Madison moved with nervous energy, pacing. Ryan, meanwhile, checked drawers, rifled through shelves, too comfortable for a first-time thief. So this was the plan: drain me, rob me, replace me. At 10:03, Ryan opened my safe. Empty. His body stiffened. He called out something to Madison. She rushed over, peered inside, her voice breaking. "It was supposed to be here." That's when I stepped into the hall. Quiet. Controlled. No theatrics, just the steady rhythm of a man who had been waiting. "Looking for something?" I asked. Their heads snapped around. Madison's face drained of color. Ryan froze, fist clenched around a crowbar he hadn't had the courage to use yet. I smiled, not wide, not cruel, just enough. Because in that moment, they finally understood. I wasn't the prey. I was the shadow in their game. And tonight, the reckoning began. Ryan was the first to speak. "You shouldn't be here," he growled, knuckles white around the crowbar. I chuckled softly. "Funny. I live here." Madison stepped forward, hands raised, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think." "Don't insult me," I cut in. Calm, flat, measured. "I know exactly what this is." Ryan shifted his weight, testing distance. He'd fought before, street style, sloppy, confident in brute force. But what he didn't know was that I'd measured that distance before he even touched the crowbar. "Put it down," I said, eyes locking on his. "Before you regret it." He sneered. "Or what? You'll call the cops? You'll tell your little school board? You're nothing." Madison flinched at that, but didn't correct him. That was the moment I saw it clear. She wasn't just a co-conspirator. She'd chosen him, believed him, maybe even loved him. And that cut deeper than any weapon. But pain makes focus sharper. I stepped forward slowly, deliberately. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to walk out that door. You're going to leave everything exactly where it is. And you're never coming back." Ryan barked a laugh. "You think you can order me around?" He raised the crowbar. Madison gasped. And that was his mistake. Because while his attention was on intimidation, mine was on precision. A single movement, quick, efficient, knocked the crowbar from his grip. It clattered to the floor, ringing louder than Madison's scream. Ryan staggered back, shocked. I didn't advance. Didn't need to. My calm was the weapon now. You had your chance, I told him quietly. But you chose the wrong battlefield. He looked at Madison, as if she might shield him. But her face was pale, frozen, caught between fear and realization. This was the unmasking. The moment she saw the difference between a man who pretends to be strong, and a man who has lived strength in silence all along. Ryan bent, retrieved the crowbar with shaking hands, and backed toward the door. His bravado was gone. Only survival remained. But the night wasn't finished. Because Madison still hadn't spoken. And I needed to hear her truth before the reckoning was complete. The door slammed behind Ryan, his footsteps fading into the night. The apartment went still, except for Madison's ragged breathing. She pressed her back to the wall, arms crossed tight, eyes darting anywhere but me. For the first time, she looked small. I waited. Finally, she whispered. You weren't supposed to be here. That stung more than any blade. Not I'm sorry. Not it's not what it looks like. Just that. Confirmation that betrayal had been the plan, and I had ruined it by existing. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. So it was real. The money. The lies. Him. Her lip trembled, but she lifted her chin. You don't understand. You've always been distant, controlled. He made me feel alive. I almost laughed. Alive? With a parasite like Ryan? A man who used her as a pawn in his endless losing game? But I didn't. Because this wasn't about Ryan anymore. This was about her. You wanted a fire, I said quietly. So you burned down your home. Tears welled, but she didn't move toward me. No apologies. No desperate reach. Just silence. That told me everything. And in that silence, I felt something break. Not anger, not sorrow. Just finality. I turned toward the door. You'll hear from my lawyer, I said, calm as ever. The bank accounts are closed. The safe is empty. Everything you thought you were building, it's already gone. Her gasp followed me down the hall, but I didn't stop. Because her truth had already been spoken, I was never part of her future. And now, she was no longer part of mine. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the car across the street, watching the window glow faintly until it went dark. Madison was inside, alone now, but her presence no longer mattered. Because the reckoning wasn't about her tears. It was about closure. About ending the story with precision, not rage. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with the file I'd built. Bank records, messages, surveillance footage. He flipped through each page, eyes widening, nodding slowly. This, he said, is airtight. By noon, the papers were filed. Joint accounts frozen. Assets secured. Every thread they thought they had tied neatly together unraveled in my hands. That evening, I returned to the apartment one last time. Madison sat at the kitchen table, mascara streaked, phone clutched like a lifeline. She looked up when I entered. They froze everything, she said, voice cracking. I don't have. That's the point, I cut in. Calm. Final. You don't have me. You don't have my name. You don't have my future. Ryan can give you whatever scraps are left of his. That's your choice now. She reached out then, desperate, fingers trembling. Wait, please. I made a mistake. I stepped back. 4 years, I had been the man who gave patience, forgiveness, second chances. But tonight, I wasn't that man. No, I said, pulling the keys from my pocket and laying them on the counter. You made a decision. And with that, I walked out, the door closing behind me like a final gavel strike. In the silence of the hallway, I felt it. Not triumph, not vengeance. Something sharper, cleaner. Freedom. Because sometimes revenge isn't about breaking your enemies. It's about cutting yourself free from the chains they forged. And that cut is final. Weeks passed. Papers were signed, lawyers traded words, and the apartment that once echoed with lies now belonged to silence. I didn't look back. Ryan vanished from her life almost as quickly as he had entered. Word reached me through my old friend. Debts had caught up to him, the kind you don't pay off with charm. He disappeared into the same shadows he crawled out from. Madison tried, of course. Late-night calls. Emails with subject lines like, please talk, and we can fix this. I never answered. Her voice faded into static, her apologies into noise. Because the truth was simple, betrayal has no rewind button. Once the mask comes off, it never goes back on. I moved into a smaller place. Sparse. Quiet. My own. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels earned. Every morning, I brewed coffee in peace. Every night, I slept without wondering who was whispering in the dark. And when people asked what happened, I just smiled. Life taught me a lesson, I'd say. Because in the end, it wasn't about Madison or Ryan. It was about me. About reclaiming the part of myself they thought they could break. They played their game of betrayal. But I wrote the ending. And that ending was freedom.